I sensed a lot of frustration in the captain's voice in the postseason availability, where he was like, I just want to make the playoffs. Like these guys want to win, and they've invariably, players who are playing at the professional level have been stars and winners all the way along. When you're 14 or 15 years old and you're that talented, you're probably, winning championships and cups and tournaments based on your own skill. And then you go to junior, and a lot of these guys are involved in programs like the World Juniors. So they're used to winning. And then here you are, no matter how competitive you are, 6 out of the last 7 years, you haven't made the playoffs. And what's the danger of that losing culture seeping in? And I think it's a fascinating story. You look at Edmonton, you look at Connor McDavid, who last night for the first time kind of pointed the finger at his not necessarily his goaltender, but certainly the defensive part of their game by saying, you score 4 goals, it should be enough to win a game. And you see this, like, we judge great players by championships, whether that's fair or not. But when you talk about Crosby, it's how many cups he's won. Gretzky, Messier, I know we're not allowed to bring him up in this market, but you talk about titles, about success, about what players, how many true top-end Hall of Famers didn't get their hands on a cup. So I think for players like Pettersson and like Hughes, they're still young, but then you look at that sort of layer above them, and guys like Horvat, it's like you can't keep losing and just always hoping for tomorrow to steal your, hope's not a strategy. So where do you really see this team going, and what do they need to do to get there? What are they going to do this offseason? Are you expecting a big trade? Are you expecting a free agent splash? We've seen that in the last 2 years, both free agent splash and a big trade. Like, where is this team going?
I would expect that they are going to try for a big trade this summer. I found myself thinking, as you talked a bit about Bo Horvat and what he had to say and his frustrations and the lessons perhaps from Edmonton. I thought back to a thing I wrote 3 summers ago. It was the 1-year first anniversary of Trevor Linden's dismissal. And, essentially said, did Trevor Linden matter? Did whatever, the change of bringing him in and saying, well, ownership wasn't happy with Gillis and we want to take things in a new direction, and our president is this new president is offering a new sort of approach, a new plan. Did that amount to anything? And at the time I said, I'm not so sure, because, Linden basically said, this is going to take another 4 years. Well, hey, 4 years is 2023. They obviously were close in 2020, then COVID came, but it was no guarantee that team was actually making the playoffs. For all the sort of fun, good work they did, they still were only a bubble team when everything stopped. And don't forget, at that point, they'd lost Jacob Markstrom, and they were going to have to lean on Thatcher Demko, and Demko was having some struggles at that point. So, they made the playoffs, and that, to their credit, they made the playoffs in pretty, weird, I'm hesitant to say difficult, but challenging circumstances. And they tried hard, and they wanted to be there, and they put their best foot forward. But then they weren't, management, for a variety of reasons, both through their own poor decision making, and then also just a foot being put down on the budget from ownership. They weren't able to sort of exploit the growth they had there. Took a huge step back. And then, had to reset again for this year and try to fix a whole bunch of problems at once, and ended up having to change the coach. Now they found the right coach for the moment, but forward progress requires method and planning and being smart with your top picks, which they've done well. But you also have to be smart with your later round picks. And for the most part, and this is the thing I noted again on the weekend when I wrote about, sort of the challenges in front of the Canucks, in front of Alvin and Rutherford. Ironically, Alvin comes in looking at a rather bare prospects cupboard, which was exactly the same problem that Jim Benning faced when he came in. And he did make some good
and
picks.
Mike Gillis.
Yeah, but he made some good picks, but in the end, a lot of those guys aren't playing here, and not for anything. Jared McCann has become a useful center, and Gustav Forsling was a guy that was discarded and has become a decent player in Florida. And obviously I mentioned Tryamkin already, and who knows what he really would have turned into. But it was again notable to me that Trent Cull was on the radio this morning, essentially criticizing the Adam Gaudette process, saying he was in the NHL too fast. He should have had a couple of years in the AHL, which was supposed to be the plan. Well, that was also really, if you want to talk about it, probably where Virtanen and McCann should have been. They were rushed, and there was this endless effort to rush and rush and rush, and so they misfired on all these picks as a result. And here we are, and the lesson is back to where it's going to be. You have to be a bit more methodical. You have to be, you have to hit on every signing you make. There are 32 teams in the NHL now. 16 teams don't make the playoffs. It's actually a hard league now to make the playoffs, and you can't sort of luck in. First of all, it's really hard to luck into the playoffs. It's almost impossible. And then once you get there, it's next to impossible to luck into any success. And I think that's the reality here. And I totally get why Bo Horvat's frustrated, because I can, he's a guy that's been around this for a long time, and he's a smart guy. And when he steps back and looks at it all, he can see where all the missteps will probably have been. He wouldn't probably admit to them publicly, but you can understand why he expresses frustrations. That he knows that your career is only so long, you get only so many opportunities, and a lot of those opportunities have gone out the window already for him.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up, especially with the later on draft picks. If you look at that 2011 team, certainly you had the success of the very high picks with the Sedins. You have the glitzy acquisition with a guy like Luongo. But it's the BX, the Hansen, the Burrows, those finds that you have along the way that really make you a championship team. Now, okay, so Horvat's not going to admit it publicly. That's your job as a reporter to get him to admit that, yeah. Patrick. You got to work your sources.